request that we provide an opportunity now for GAC, the Georgia Accrediting Commission, to provide the board and stakeholders with what would be described as an exit report from the district. As you can recall, several months ago, it was recommended that the DeKalb County School District seek dual accreditation along with Advanced Ed SACs. A monitoring team was here from GAC this past week. They completed their work. That was an exit interview with the superintendent's office, and I thought it would be more than appropriate, and I think important for these men and this monitoring team to share with the board their evaluations, impressions, and findings after spending a very intensive week evaluating and visiting all 22 of the high schools here in DeKalb County, Georgia.
Moved by Mr. Thurman, second by Mr. Orson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. It's unanimous. It passes unanimously. Now I call for the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Dr. Marley, second by Dr. Irwin. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. It passes unanimously. Mr. Jester, okay. Our first item on the agenda will be GAC. Mr. Thurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm honored, really, and delighted, privileged, really, to introduce first Mr. Boyd, who leads our monitoring team here in DeKalb County, Georgia. I also want to say that it has been really a pleasure to work with GAC. They have been extremely professional and insightful and honest in their assessments, focus, and direction. And I'm convinced that as a result of this relationship and our ongoing relationship, that this will result in improved quality and delivery of educational services for our students here in DeKalb County. Prior to introducing Mr. Boyd, who will introduce his team, I also want to recognize Dr. Sherry Everett, who led the team here for us in DeKalb County, Georgia. From all reports, she did an excellent job, and her team members are to be acknowledged and appreciated, and thanks for your efforts and on behalf of the district. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll call on Mr. Boyd, Dr. Boyd, and he can introduce his team and proceed from there.
Okay, let me introduce my team. To my right is Dr. John Bembry. Dr. Bembry has been an educator in the state of Georgia for a number of years. To my left is Dr. Harris, E.H. Harris. Dr. Harris, too, has been an educator in the state of Georgia for many years. And then to his left is Mr. Phil Thomas. Mr. Phil Thomas has been an educator for a number of years as well. All of us have been administrators of public schools in the state of Georgia. Let me say that when we visit schools, and we visited 23 of your high schools last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. First thing we do when we walk in the building and meet the principal is to ask to see the facility. We have been throughout all 23 of the facilities. All of them seem to be very well organized, very well maintained. Some few of them were a little bit older than others, but they are being used at max capacity, it seems, in most situations. We found them to be very well organized when we got down to checking the standards and their documentation of the standards. The documentation was outstanding, and I credit Dr. Everett and her staff and the principals and the people in the schools that were setting up those boxes of information and documentation. They did a superb job. That sometimes you have to go, when you go into a school, you ask for certain things, and they have to run get it. Not one time did I have to ask for something that they had to run get last week. It was there in the box, ready for me to see. By the way, we checked even restrooms last week. We did not find a single dirty, filthy, smelly restroom. And all of us checked. We didn't go in every one, but we spot checked, and there was no way the principal could know which ones we were going into. It seems as though to me, and I want each of the other gentlemen to chime in when they have something they want to tell the board, things that they found. Seems to me that the principals still have some autonomy in DeKalb County as to the kinds of programs they can operate, that they can develop some of their own programs to meet the needs of their particular kids. That is extremely good. Anytime we start running a school system and it has to be run by the numbers, and one school can't do something that every other school has to do it too, that is sad. It kills all kinds of initiative and creativity to do that. So I compliment you about that. Of the 5 programs that I visited, I think there were 3 of them on the block schedule where they had 90-minute periods. I think that if I had to go one way or the other to a 7-period day or to a block schedule, I would do something to keep that block schedule. Because you can do all kinds of things with lab work, added time for research, investigations of all kinds and descriptions. Once you get a class started, and most any classroom teacher will tell you this, once you get a class started, there's a momentum there that if you have to stop after 55 minutes and start again the next day, there's something lost, something lost. So I would encourage, and I ask these other gentlemen to chime in and say what they feel about that aspect. Anybody?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elton Harris, an educator for 40 years in education, 1 year in Lawrence County, 2 in Pike, and 37 in Lamar. Worked at all levels in the educational field. Enjoyed all of it, enjoyed all of my experiences in education. I learned that if you go into education, you need to be dedicated. Number one, working with the kids. If you're not dedicated to work with the children, you're in the wrong place in education, because children are what we're all about when we go in there. Although we work with the board and everyone else, but those children need our help to help them to be better citizens, and we must give them the best that we have at the time that we are there. Let me say, I went into 6 of your schools, and my doctor had been telling me all along to take exercise. I want you to know that I got plenty of exercise last week. I've never walked as much as I did last week in any schools. As a matter of fact, I'm experiencing some aches even now, okay? But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed my experience here in your school system. And I saw a lot of great things, a lot of great things. As it has been stated, the principals all was at their best. And I don't think they could have been their best at one day. They had to have had experience in working with kids every day that they're there and giving those children the best that they have as far as providing leadership. All the schools were doing a great job, and all of the schools that I went in was on the block schedule. But I want to talk specifically about the last two schools that I visited. The DeKalb School of the Arts, very unique, very unique. Had a lot of outstanding programs going on in the school. Had an outstanding principal there working with those kids. Now, all the principals are outstanding, so don't go back and say, now, Harris came up here and bragged on this principal and did not brag on the other one. All of them was outstanding principal. But she was doing a great work as far as working with the kid. Now, in the alternative school, I've seen many, but I've never seen one as structured as I saw the alternative school here in your school system. Very structured, principal doing what she needs to do, teachers doing what they need to do, and those kids very behaved and doing what they need to do, moving around in the building. Now, I like to see class changes. I like to go into the cafeteria. So I experienced all kinds of things when I was here. And everything I saw was very good. Although in your media center, I think you all recognize that if you did not meet that standard, there are going to be some things you will need to work on. But that did not keep those media specialists from doing what they need to do as far as providing what needs to have been done in those schools. So I had a great experience for 3 days. Great experience, enjoyed it. And if I'm still around 5 years from now, you want me to come back, I won't be but 80 at that time, but if you want me to come back, I may not be able to walk as much as I did this time, but I'll be happy to come back if you desire to have my service in the future. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Phil.
They say for me to go ahead. All right. Just as the other two gentlemen have said, I'm also a lifetime educator, having worked in Fulton County most of my career as a social studies teacher, assistant principal, high school principal for 13 years. I also always had a leaning toward technology, and so when I left the principalship, I was the director of instructional technology for Georgia for 3 years, and then instructional technology for Fulton County for 4 years. And then some people would say I went over to the dark side, went into the private sector, worked for Promethean, and had the good fortune of training and working with your teachers and with your tech specialists and others as you adopted the Promethean equipment and not only decided to buy equipment, but did the right thing and trained the people so that they would know how to use it. Like Mr. Boyd and Dr. Harris, this is a great opportunity for me visiting DeKalb County. I have a little different slant on it in that, first of all, I'm a graduate of DeKalb County. I graduated from Gordon High School, now McNair Middle School, in 1965. I have two daughters who graduated from Tucker High School, where I had an opportunity to visit last week. It's a new Tucker High School, but it's still on the same site. And it was a great time. I saw my son and daughter yesterday and got to tell them about that visit. They were very envious that I got to come back. And my son also attended there, but we moved to Gwinnett County, and he graduated from Parkview. But that was a great experience going back to Tucker. And then that afternoon, on Tuesday afternoon, I went to Clarkston High School, where I student taught. And so it was homecoming. Thomas Wolfe said you can't go home again, but I would differ with him. I did come home last week, and it was a great experience. I think the thing that struck me the most about my visits, and I visited 6 of your schools as well, was the leadership. You can be extremely proud of the people you have running your schools. They're doing a great job, and they, alongside of them, have some great teachers that are doing a great job. The facilities that you have are wonderful, but you have unique facilities. When you walk in, when I went to Clarkston on Tuesday afternoon, the principal at Tucker had taken me to Matthews to eat lunch. Of course, you have to go to Matthews for lunch. But I go into the media center where they had me headquartered, and there's 3 students standing there at attention, if you will, not in military uniforms, although you do have some wonderful ROTC programs, but they were a part of your culinary arts program. And they had prepared chicken and meatballs and bruschetta, and I can tell you, I have not had such good food in any restaurant in Atlanta. It was unbelievable. And then when I visited Cross Keys, and you know, having graduated from DeKalb County, Cross Keys was across town from me, and never had an opportunity to go there. But the school had such a wonderful technology program there, career technology program. Had a dental program, which I've never seen in a high school in all my life. And I've traveled all over this country training for Promethean and have never seen a dental medical program. Then they had a nursing program. Then they had a construction program that was a certified program for electricians and for construction and other areas. But that wasn't the best part. It was the teacher. I didn't think we were going to be able to leave because he was so excited to tell us about the construction program at Cross Keys High School. And the great thing at Cross Keys was the principal also that had been the math teacher at the elementary school just a year before and has come across the street and is now principal at the school, and he's got the same students he had when he was teaching 5th grade math at his elementary school. And that's just some of the stories. I mean, Southwest DeKalb, all of these schools that I visited, it was exciting. And I know you as board members and as cabinet members, you don't get to get out there and be in the schools as much as you'd like, but it was exciting to be in those schools. And, you know, when I was a principal, I told my teachers, I said, you know what, I want every day when people come through these doors, whether they're teachers, whether they're students, whether they're cafeteria workers, whether they're custodians, I want them to be happy that they're here. And, you know, I think the people working and learning in your schools are happy to be there. They may not be happy every day, but I think it's a great place to be, and you can be very proud of the schools that you have. So thank you for letting me be here. It was an honor, and I was very privileged to visit those six schools that I did. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bembry. I guess to sum me up, I'm a small town boy. 36 and a half years in education. About 10 of those, I believe, was actually in the classroom, the others in administration. The last 5.5 years is superintendent of a small school system that many of you probably pass through if you're going down to Florida. And you have to be careful because the sheriff is usually out there, Dooley County. I had some very unique opportunities. The first school I went to was Arabia High School. And I got to see what the cream of the crop looked like and how they conducted themselves in their uniforms walking up and down the halls. I was also pleased to note that the culinary arts program had prepared food. And I think the faculty was kind of happy too, because they prepared enough food for breakfast and lunch for everybody. And I really enjoyed that. My second school was Martin Luther King Junior High School. And if you really think about those two schools, there's a real contrast in the students that are there. I was very impressed with the principal because as we toured the building, he knew his kids and they knew him. And I heard Dr. Harris say something about wanting to see the kids. I always want to see what the kids are like. When the bell changes, I want to be in the halls. And I was impressed that in both schools, the kids were pleasantly surprising to me. They conducted themselves as young men and young women. In the next couple of days, I got to come into this building, and I went to Elizabeth Andrews High School. And the principal there talked to me about how that school functions and how you are attempting to catch those kids who, for whatever reason, have fallen through the cracks, and they have the opportunity to come back. And then I got into DeKalb Early College, and I am a second-generation college graduate. And I remember when I was a little boy, I always knew that I was going to college because my mother and her 4 sisters had been. And I think how powerful that is to begin to create that in your community. We think sometimes that college is not as important as it used to be, but it's still, in my opinion, a doorway for kids to move out of poverty and into the mainstream of the society. The last school I went to was Towers High School, and the principal began to take me around, and he talked about his, I guess it's this media room that they have, and how they had used it kind of recently because one of their students, I believe she was a senior, had a parent who was terminally ill. And they decided to film a mock graduation so that parent could see her daughter graduate. And as we've talked about the people we got to meet, they all were very caring. They all were concerned about their students. Now, incidentally, too, they didn't stop administrating when they were with us. So if there was a kid and he was not where he was supposed to be, they checked him then. And, you know, it didn't matter that there's company in the building. They did their job. We haven't really talked about things that I think are quality things. The first would be the commitment of the board to having extra administrators. There were assistant principals. According to our standard, you have a principal, and then if your numbers go up, you earn a full-time AP. But in most cases, you had 3 or 4. And then the other thing was the counselors. Your commitment, you should be commended for your commitment to having counselors beyond what the standard requires. We know that young people need as much help as they can get, and they need people who are professional in handling problems and situations. And oftentimes they can't talk to the administrators. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to have visited your schools. I got a compliment, Dr. Harris, one of my friends told me I lost a little weight. I told him I think it was having walked around those big schools that you have. But again, your facilities are very nice, your staff was very nice, and we are very, very complimentary of your efforts. Thank you.
Let me say two or three other things. Of course, as the other consultants have indicated, every school is unique. There are things about each one that is different than you find in a regular school every day. But there were several things in the last school that I visited, which was Stevenson High School, that I wanted to mention. And that is, number one, the 9th grade academy, where they were keeping the 9th graders in a separate, almost a separate facility, completely away from the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I'm sure this was an effort to transition from middle school to high school and give the parents some little bit of comfort in knowing that their children are being separated and taken care of to that degree. So I would compliment you for that, and they even had a separate lunchroom. Now, I fully realize that that can't be in every high school, but that's something we could consider and work towards as we build new facilities. I, too, along with Dr. Bembry, would congratulate you on having at least 4 assistant principals in most of the facilities. I think there were at least 4 in every one that I went into. The other thing that we found was that in those schools that were beyond 1,000 students, our standards call for a second media specialist, and in some cases a clerk, a full-time clerk. I think that we did not find a single school that was over 1,000 students that had 2 media specialists. We have said to the superintendent that we think that if that is a place that if we have to cut, that that's probably one of the better places to cut. We see that with the internet having come on the scene, kids are fully capable of researching materials without even going into the media center, which says to me it can be cut in staff. We think that eventually we're going to see things change in that direction, and we're going to see perhaps our standards adjusted accordingly. Now, there are I think we have found 4 schools below 1,000 students who had a media specialist and perhaps maybe even a clerk or a part-time clerk, and there may be as many as 3 or 4. We've got to continue to look at that. There may be as many as 3 or 4 that may meet our standards with quality, but the others will not. The high schools, the larger high schools will not at the present. Now, this is going to be discussed, I know, at our March meeting. And if that is changed at the March meeting, our adjustment may be in our level of accreditation as well. But let me say that that really does not matter. The only person or persons that's going to know what your level of accreditation in each school is probably the principal and the consultant, and of course our executive director. We will be having a a GAC board meeting the first weekend in March. All of the consultants' reports will go to the commission at that meeting, prior to that meeting. They will be voting at that meeting on the schools that are recommended for accreditation. I would say within a week or two after that meeting, each of your schools will be getting certificates and so forth from our executive director that they can frame and put on the wall in the office or their office or wherever. And we will leave you alone for 5 years. You keep paying your fee every year, $50 per school, but you don't have to have another visitation for 5 years. We have certainly enjoyed our work with the DeKalb County Schools. I first met with this board, I think, almost 2 years ago, and we've been conversing with Superintendent Thurman and Mrs. Everett, Dr. Everett, and their staff, and we finally made it, and we feel very good about our visit last week.
Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Boyd, Dr. Bimmery, Dr. Harris, Mr. Thomas. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for your service to the children of this state and our nation as educators. And we have been honored by your presence, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the coming years. And I think we should really just, let's stand up, y'all, because we ain't got that accreditation yet, so we're going to do one more thing. Let's give them a standing ovation.